The conference room smells like new carpet. That's the first thing I notice when I walk in. New carpet and coffee from a machine that probably costs more than my first car. Everything in this room is designed to make you feel like you don't quite belong in it. Low chairs on one side of the table, higher ones on the other. Floor-to-ceiling glass with a view of the city. I've been in rooms like this before. I know the trick of them. I take the chair at the end of the row, the one where the afternoon light doesn't hit your eyes. Nobody tells me to sit there. I just sit down. My father comes in 2 minutes later. He sees me and does the thing he does. That half-second pause, like a man who has walked into a room and found the furniture rearranged. Then he nods. Not warmly, just acknowledges I'm there. He doesn't ask what I'm doing in a lease renewal meeting for his company's building. He sits 2 seats away. Marcus comes in behind him. My brother is wearing the blazer. You know the one, if you have a brother like Marcus. The jacket that tells the room he's serious. Dark wool, silver buttons, the ease of a man who has never once wondered whether he belonged somewhere. He shakes hands with Gerald Fitch, their attorney, with the specific confidence of someone who has always assumed that hands would be extended toward him. I watch all of this. I don't say anything. I've been not saying anything for a while. I've gotten good at it. Gerald sits at the head of the table and opens his folder. He is very carefully not looking at me, which tells me everything about what's coming. The lease renewal for the commercial property at 4400 Hargrove Street, he says, is the primary matter before us today. My father nods. Before we proceed, Gerald says, and stops, shuffles a paper that doesn't need shuffling. I want to confirm that all parties are aware of the full ownership structure of the property as it currently stands. My father frowns. It's the Callaway Group building. We've been tenants 9 years. What's to confirm? Gerald sets his pen down. Callaway sold the property 22 months ago, he says. The current owner of record is Redwood Capital Partners. My father nods again, slower this time. So, we're dealing with Redwood's people. Gerald's eyes move across the table. They find me. They stay there. The managing partner of Redwood Capital Partners, he says, is seated at this table. The room goes quiet. My father turns. He looks at Marcus first. That automatic thing. The compass to north reflex I have watched my entire life. Marcus is frowning, still working it out. Then my father looks at me, and his face goes completely still. I need to take you back. I want to be honest up front that this was not a grand plan. There was no moment where I sat down and thought, one day I will own their building. It's tidier in the telling than it ever was in the living. But to explain the living of it, I have to start in 2003. Sunday dinner. I was 19, home from my first semester, sitting at the table my parents bought when Marcus was born, big enough for a family of consequence, which was the kind of family my father had always intended to have. Marcus was 23, just accepted into a postgraduate business program at a university my father talked about the way other men talk about sports teams. Marcus was going to run the family business. That was not a plan so much as a fact of geography, like a river knowing which way it runs. I had declared my major that semester, real estate finance. My father looked up from his plate, slowly, the way he looked up when he wanted you to understand his attention was something you'd earned. Real estate, he said. Yes, I explained it. Market cycles, commercial assets, investment analysis versus property management. I had 3 notebooks full of notes. I was genuinely excited. That was probably visible, which, in retrospect, may have worked against me. My director, Patricia Osei, told me after my first year that I had the best instinct for undervalued assets she'd seen in a junior analyst in 15 years. I held on to that sentence on the days when I needed something to hold on to. There were a lot of those days, more than I usually let myself admit out loud. I hadn't told my family much about the job, partly because they hadn't asked, partly because I'd developed by then a habit of not leading with things they might find a way to make smaller. I'm not proud of that instinct, but I understood it. It made sense at the time. At the party, my Uncle Bernard found me near the drinks table. Bernard was my father's younger brother. He had the quality of men who orbit a more confident person long enough that they start adopting their judgments as their own. He looked at Marcus. One of those looks, the quick, confirming one between two people who have already had a version of this conversation without you. "Realtors show houses," he said. "Is that what you want to do?" "That's not what the degree is," I started. "Your cousin Angela shows houses," my mother said from the other end of the table. "She does fine. She really does, but it's not—" Her hands moved in the air, looking for the landing. "It's not really what we pictured." "What did you picture?" I said. Nobody answered, which was its own answer. I finished my dinner. I drove back to university the following morning. I did not change my major. The second moment was 2009, Rebecca's engagement party. I was 25, 2 years out of university, working as a junior analyst at Hartwell Capital, running comparables, building valuation models, doing the spreadsheet work that senior analysts presented in meetings while I sat against the wall. I was good at it. Not good like I thought I was. Actually good. Verifiably good. The kind that shows up in numbers and gets noticed by people who know what they're looking at. "Your brother tells me you're still doing the property thing," he said. "Senior analyst at Hartwell Capital," I said. "Part of a team managing a commercial portfolio currently around $340 million. He blinked. The number was larger than expected. I watched him recalibrate. "Still," he said, "it's not like what Marcus is building. A real business. Something with employees. Something you can put your hands on, you know?" I thought about a lot of things I could have said. I said, "Would you like another drink?" He said yes. I poured it. The conversation moved on. I've thought about that moment more than it probably deserves. Part of me wishes I'd said something. Part of me understands that there was nothing worth saying to Bernard specifically. I still go back and forth on it. I don't think there's a right answer. The third moment was the one that mattered. My parents' 35th anniversary dinner. 4 years ago. The restaurant Marcus chose. Because Marcus always chose. One of those places where the menu has no prices on the customer side. Between main course and dessert, my father stood to make a toast. He thanked my mother, he talked about 35 years, and then he talked about Marcus, the business, the new warehouse, the retail contracts. He used the word proud 3 times. His voice broke on the third, the way it does when something is genuinely felt rather than performed. He sat down. Dessert came. I counted my name in the toast. 0. I've spent a lot of time thinking about whether that was deliberate or whether he genuinely just didn't think of it. I still don't know. I'm not sure which version is easier to sit with. Probably neither. My mother caught my eye across the table. She gave me the apology smile, the one that says, "I know, and I'm sorry, and I'm not going to do anything about it." I smiled back. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a glass of water I kept forgetting to drink, and I opened a file I had been thinking about for a long time. Let me tell you about the years before that night. The actual years. The first 3 at Hartwell were fine. I was learning. Patricia believed in me in a way that mattered more than I showed. But the salary was modest. The work was unglamorous. I was in a one-bedroom with a kitchen sink leak the landlord took 4 months to fix, a 2-bus commute when the weather turned bad, and a savings rate that required a specific kind of determination to maintain on a junior analyst salary when the city around you has other ideas about what your money is for. I was putting away what I could, consistently. The discipline of someone who has decided on a destination and is walking toward it one step at a time, because running isn't yet an option. In 2012, I found my first real acquisition target, a small mixed-use commercial building in the Eastern District, 2 retail units below, office space above, an estate executor who wanted a fast, clean sale. The numbers made sense. I had enough, barely, with a private loan from an investor contact I'd built through Hartwell to make a credible offer. I lost it. Cash buyer, no conditions, 3-week close. I couldn't move that fast. I figured it out. Slowly. Expensively. In the way you figure things out when no one in your family has done it before you, and there is no knowledge being passed down through the table at Sunday dinner. My father had business knowledge. Import, distribution, relationships. None of it transferred to what I was doing. I was building without a map from the people who were supposed to give you maps. I want to name that plainly because I think it gets left out of these stories too often. It was harder than it needed to be. Part of why it was harder was that I was completely alone in it. By 2019, I had a small portfolio, 3 properties, real, owned, mine. Redwood Capital Partners as the corporate vehicle, a proper structure, a proper strategy, and Patricia, who had spent 2 years of conversations she didn't owe me, helping me think through the long-term plan. Then, the Hartwell portfolio flagged the Hargrove Street cluster. I sat in my car outside the building the week after. I'm not entirely sure why. I just sat there and looked at it for a while. I think I was trying to figure out whether I was wrong about the whole direction or whether this was just one setback in a direction that was still right. I decided it was a setback. Looking back, I still can't tell you for certain whether that was clarity or stubbornness. Honestly, it was probably both. 2 years later, I got a small retail unit. I managed it badly at first. Tenant issues that dragged on longer than they should have. A repair bill that came in at twice the estimate. A 6-week vacancy that cost more than I'd calculated. Standard first-time mistakes. The kind the books describe, but don't quite prepare you for until you're sitting across from a contractor who is telling you the number with a look on his face that means this is not going to be a pleasant afternoon. 4 buildings. Mid-size commercial. Undervalued because the current owner had been managing them passively for years. Strong tenancy history. Good bones. I pulled the tenancy schedule. Listed under 4400 Hargrove Street, Castellan Import Group. My family's business. I put the file down. Made coffee. Stood at my kitchen window for about 20 minutes looking at the street without really seeing it. My brain was running ahead of me, turning the thing over, testing angles, asking questions I didn't have ready answers to. I called Patricia. She picked up on the second ring. I found a portfolio, I said. Hargrove Street. The numbers are strong. There's a complication. What kind? One of the tenants is my family's business. Does that change the numbers? She asked. No. Then it's not a complication, she said. It's a fact. What do you want to do? I thought about the anniversary dinner. The toast. 3 minutes. 0 mentions. I want to acquire it, I said. Then let's talk about how, she said. I want to be honest about this part, because I think I owe it to the story. I didn't acquire the property to teach my family a lesson. That's the cleaner version, and it isn't quite true. The honest version is that I acquired it because the deal was sound, and because I had spent years building the judgment to recognize a sound deal. And I was not going to let my family's presence in the tenancy schedule talk me out of something I had legitimately earned the right to pursue. But I also didn't warn them. I could have. A phone call, a heads up, a mention at one of those Sunday lunches. The ownership was going to be public record regardless. But I didn't say anything. I've sat with whether that was right. I still sit with it sometimes. I don't have a clean answer, and I'm suspicious of people who would. The acquisition closed 14 months later. 14 months of due diligence, financing, negotiation, legal review, none of it fast. By the time Redwood became the owner of record, I was tired. In the deep, specific way of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has not told anyone what it weighs. I told no one in my family. They didn't notice. Which was, in its own way, the whole story. The lease renewal came up 8 months after the acquisition closed. 6 weeks before the meeting, at a family lunch my mother organized, the kind she called low-key, and then spent 2 days cooking for, my father mentioned it casually. Said Castellan's lease was coming up. Said the new owners were pushing for a rate increase. 14%. He shook his head. These new investment companies, he said, they buy up buildings and straight away they start squeezing. No relationship, no loyalty, just numbers. I was sitting directly across from him. I said, "That sounds frustrating." He nodded. "Marcus is handling the negotiation," he said. "He's good at that side of things. Better than me, honestly." He said it easily, paying his son a compliment with no awareness of who else was in the room. I don't think it was cruelty. I genuinely don't. It was a man who had long ago decided where to point his attention and had gotten so used to that direction that he didn't notice what was in his peripheral vision anymore. I said, "I'm sure he'll do well." I looked out the window. I thought about 19 years old at that dinner table. The word realtor dropped like a verdict. Uncle Bernard and the word still. The toast. And the 0. Then I picked up my coffee and finished it. In the conference room on the 14th floor, after Gerald said my name, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Marcus leaned forward. His voice was strange, not the usual easy register. Something tighter. "You own this building?" he said. "Redwood Capital Partners owns it," I said. "I'm the managing partner." "Since when?" my father said. Diana, my attorney, slid the ownership documents across the table. The acquisition closed 22 months ago. It's been public record throughout. My father asked one question about the escalation clause. A technical question. A good one. It surprised me. I don't know why I was surprised. He built a business. Of course he could read a lease. I think I had underestimated him, the same way he had underestimated me. I hadn't expected that to occur to me sitting in that room, but it did. He looked up at me. "You could have..." He stopped. Started again. "When you acquired the property, you could have said something." I thought about how to answer. There were several true answers. I picked one. You could have asked, I said. In 20 years, no one asked what I was building. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. Marcus looked at the table. The terms are acceptable, my father said. Diana moved to the signature pages. Pens on paper. And that was it. No speech, no scene. Just the scratch of signatures, and the smell of new carpet, and the city going on outside the glass. Here is what happened after. No cleaner than it actually was. My father looked at the documents. He looked at them for a long time. I watched him read my name on something that represented an asset his business depended on. I watched him understand, slowly, what he was looking at. I had expected, I think I'd been half expecting, without fully knowing it, some version of a confrontation. A scene where everything that had never been said finally got said. Where someone named the pattern. Where the zero in the toast got acknowledged. That didn't happen. What happened was my father read the documents. Then he looked at me. Then back at the documents. And then he said, in a voice I had no reference for, the terms. What are the terms? Diana walked them through it. 21% above the current rate, 5-year term, defined escalation clauses. Fair terms. We'd been deliberate about that. Marcus read the document twice, ran a hand through his hair. This is a significant jump, he said. It reflects where the market is, Diana said. The previous lease was 7 years without any adjustment. My father called that Sunday. Not the day after, 4 days later, Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, the time he calls Marcus. I didn't know he knew my schedule well enough to time it that way. Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was coincidence. He asked about the portfolio, the buildings, how I managed them, what the long-term plan looked like. Real questions. I gave real answers. We talked for 40 minutes, which was 40 minutes longer than we had ever talked about my work before. At the end, he said, I didn't understand what you were doing. He paused for a while. I should have paid more attention. That was it. That's what he said. Not, I'm sorry. Not a reckoning with 27 years of Sunday dinners and anniversary toasts, and the way a man can look at his daughter and simply not see her. Just, I should have paid more attention. Said quietly, by a man in his late 60s, sitting with something he didn't have better language for. I know, I said. We hung up. He called the following Sunday, and the one after that. We talk most weeks now. The calls are not always easy. Last month, he mentioned Marcus's business, just a casual comment, the old reflex surfacing without him noticing it, and I felt the old thing move through me. That specific low-grade feeling I don't have a clean name for. Grief is too large. Annoyance is too small. Something in between that I suspect doesn't go away. You just get better at carrying it through a conversation without it showing. I didn't say anything about it. I let it go. My mother asked me a few months ago how I did it, how I built all of it without anyone knowing it. I had to think about how to answer honestly. Because the truth is, I did need people to notice. For a long time, I needed it badly, and the wanting of it had its own weight. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The thing that changed wasn't that I stopped needing it. The thing that changed was that I stopped waiting for it to come from them specifically. I found other places. Patricia, Diana, people who showed up and paid attention in the ways my family hadn't. I built a life around people who could actually see me. I didn't say all of that to my mother. I said, I just kept building. And eventually, the building spoke for itself. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We should have been watching. I should have been watching." I said, "Yeah, you should have." Not, "It's okay." Not, "Don't worry about it." Just, "Yeah, you should have." Because they should have. And I've spent enough of my life making things comfortable for people at the expense of what was true. Some things don't fully heal. I think I knew that going into the conference room. I wasn't walking in there expecting my father to finally see me and for everything to rearrange itself into something better. I was walking in there because I had built something real, and the document said so. And that was enough. That had to be enough. It mostly is. On Sunday mornings, my father calls. Sometimes the conversation is good. Sometimes he says the wrong thing and doesn't notice. I'm still figuring out what to do with those moments. Probably I'll be figuring that out for a while. But I own 4 buildings on Hargrove Street. My family's business is in one of them. I get up every morning and work on something I built from nothing, in a field nobody at that table thought was worth the chair I was sitting in. And on Sunday mornings, my father calls. It's not everything I wanted, but I stopped needing it to be. What did you keep building while no one was watching?